Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Capturing Canyons, Desert Southwest Photo Expedition, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Arthur Kampmann. I'm your host, Rob Bess. Thank you for being here with us today. Take it away, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you everyone for tuning in this afternoon or whatever time of the day it is in your part of the world. We're here to talk about our upcoming Desert Southwest Photo Expedition into Canyon Country. And right here we got a photo just right outside of the North Rim Lodge, right at sunset of the Grand Canyon, of course, the infamous. And so the hope is today is to show some great photos, talk about some techniques that we'll be wanting to utilize on this upcoming trip. And so my name is Arthur Kampmann. I am an expedition leader with NatHab, lead a lot of different trips for NatHab up in Alaska, the U.S. national parks. But I can say Canyon Country is one of a kind. Getting to photograph in this part of the world is absolutely spectacular and unique. I've traveled and worked all around the world in amazing places, but there is something so spectacular about photographing these iconic parks that really brings out the creative aspect of a lot of people. And so it's so fun, and I've had so much fun making this presentation, bringing up some great memories of times in Canyon Country. So our trip is going to focus in on a very specific area of Canyon Country, and we're going to have three primary parks that we're going to visit on this trip. We are going to visit other places, national forests, state parks, but the three major photographic locations that we'll be going to are going to be Bryce Canyon National Park, Zion National Park, and Grand Canyon National Park. These three parks are absolutely incredible for photography, and I'm going to give you some great tips and some great inspiration for this upcoming trips here. So each of these parks is unique in terms of where they sit elevation-wise, temperature. So you can see Bryce Canyon, that'll be our first park that we'll go to. That's up pretty high, 8,000 to 9,000 feet. So you can see those springtime temperatures. Don't get fooled by that 70 degree of the high. Look more on the low because if we're out for sunrise or doing astrophotography, I have seen pretty cold temperatures in Bryce Canyon. I've seen snow there in the springtime. So definitely I'll get into packing and what to pack, what to wear. But just know Bryce Canyon, spring or fall, if you're going for sunrise, which we will in Bryce, you absolutely will want good layers because it can be pretty chilly in the morning and at night there. And then, of course, we'll make our way to Zion National Park. We're going to lose about 4,000 feet of elevation as we get to Zion National Park. By losing that much elevation, we do get a total change of scenery and a major change in temperature. So obviously, keep your eyes on the highs there and the lows, much different than in Bryce. You can actually get some pretty warm temperatures in Zion. I've seen 90 degrees or so. So pretty dramatic when you have about 20 degrees in Bryce and you go down to Zion and it's up to nearly 90 degrees. It's a pretty incredible transformation. But typically in the spring and the fall, we go there at a great time of the year. So we're not often seeing those, absolute scorcher days, but it of course happens. And then we will make our way up to Grand Canyon, and that's going to be back up to 8,000 feet because we go to the north rim of the Grand Canyon on this departure. And the north rim is the higher and least visited of the rims of the Grand Canyon. So, get a good look at those temperatures. The low on the springtime is going to be 25. The high is going to be 70. So kind of similar to Bryce. I would say the Grand Canyon is often for sunrise can be pretty chilly as well. So definitely we'll get into what to pack for sure. So why are we going to pick a photo expedition? We have photo expeditions and then classic nature departures. On our photo expeditions, the itinerary is essentially the same as our nature departure, but it is so much more photo focused. We're really going to be prioritizing those magical times of the day, definitely getting out there for sunrises at Bryce and the Grand Canyon. Incredible place for sunrise photography and sunset photography, especially at Grand Canyon. But on our photo departures, we are just really honing in on getting good photos. We're obviously going for hikes and doing other stuff like that as well, but we're really prioritizing photography as our main objective of the trip. On our photo departures, we are definitely going to be going at a little bit of a slower pace. I would say none of our trips go at a rapid pace, none of our NatHab trips, because we are a nature-based company, and to be out in nature, get away from the hustle and bustle, we want to slow down life. But on our photo trips, we're being very methodical and trying to execute and get creative and get amazing photos. That's the goal of the trip, for you to leave this part of the world with awesome photos, photos that you'd be happy to put on your wall, photos you're texting to people and they're saying, who took that? That's our goal, is to help you get those photos, and they're definitely achievable in this part of the world. On our photo departures, we also go in smaller groups. So a classic departure for this is going to be 14 travelers, but on our photo departure, we're only going to have 10 travelers total. That's maximum number of travelers. And you're always going to have 2 expedition leaders. So our 2 expedition leaders are it's not just skilled naturalists, they're also skilled photo instructors. So we want to help you get the shots, because we've gone to these places so many times. We love photographing there, but what we really love to do is help you get the photo. And I think that's one thing that sets NatHab above some of the other photo companies, is we really want to help you get the shot, because we've been to these places, we've gotten the shot, so now it's your time to get it. And so we might be taking photos over your shoulder, but we really want to help you get that photo. And that being said, we will also be traveling in 2 vans. So we'll have our 2 Mercedes Sprinter vans for these trips. So 2 expedition leaders, 2 vans. And that can allow for us to, if you have some people that want to just go from viewpoint to viewpoint and take photos, in that sense, we can make that happen. But also, if some people want to do a little more hiking, we can also accommodate that. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. Obviously, to go on a photo trip, you're going to need the gear. So many camera companies make incredible gear. So I always say, whatever you're used to, please bring that camera with you. On our photo departures, we do ask that you maybe have a little bit more than just your iPhone, because we want the whole group to be into it. Obviously, if you're traveling, your spouse is an avid photographer, please come along. And you're going to learn a thing or two about iPhone or Android photography that you didn't know before, because they are very useful in this ecosystem. But definitely some great cameras out there this day and age. So bring obviously what you're familiar with. A camera that's kind of taken the world by storm the past few years are these bridge cameras. So if you're looking to buy something, but you don't want to mess with the lens game, that Sony RX10 is a great bridge camera, and it does have a lot of great functions to it that you'd be able to utilize on our Canyons trip. So definitely, if you're looking to buy something but you don't want to mess with switching lenses like the mirrorless cameras have to do, those bridge cameras are awesome, and I've seen a lot of travelers really been enjoying those the past few years. And of course, I will give the expedition leaders will give great insight into the iPhones or Androids this day and age, because there's definitely places along this departure that your phone is going to do wonders. One thing I love to do with the phone on this trip is, say we're just hanging out at a viewpoint, maybe waiting for the lighting, I might just set my phone up and do a time-lapse video. One place I could absolutely love to do it is at the Grand Canyon, because you just have these expansive views. And so if that's something you're interested in trying, definitely talk to your expedition leader about that, because they can assist you in setting it up, where to do it, because the time lapses are super cool. I absolutely love watching the clouds roll around and cruise around the Grand Canyon. So if you're not doing a bridge camera, you got more than your iPhone, of course, what lenses are you going to bring? This is a primarily a landscape trip. So an 1855, a 1680, something along those lines to get big landscape photos, that's going to be your primary lens. I also love shooting with a telephoto lens on this trip because I love zooming in on the detail of the hoodoos at Bryce Canyon or shooting past the contrast at Grand Canyon. So having that telephoto lens, I think, is very, very important. There is also some wildlife along this trip that I'll talk about. So having a telephoto is a really good thing to have. And we are partners with a company called lensrental.com. And if you do NatHab15, you'll get a 15% discount if you wanted to try a lens out. On this trip, I actually bring a third lens. I typically only travel with two, but on this trip, I bring a third lens, and that's a fast lens, a lens that's got a low F number. So mine can go down to 1.4, so below 2. So it's really great for astrophotography. That's really the only reason I have this lens with me on this trip. It's a prime 23, and it is a great lens. It really is, but I'm really just using it for astrophotography because with that low F number, it just can really do some wonders with the night skies. Yeah, optional accessory stuff you might want to bring, might want to consider maybe a super wide angle lens to capture the entire canyon. I don't think a fisheye is necessary on this departure, but maybe, you know, a 10, 16, something along those lines. A macro can be really, really useful as well if you're into photographing wildflowers or, you know, unique desert insects, stuff like that. The macro lens can be incredible. I've definitely seen people get awesome images with macro lenses on trips, but these are both totally optional. And then stuff I would say is optional, but I would definitely bring it, would be extra memory cards and extra batteries. Yeah, 2 batteries, you'll be fine. But having that extra memory card is important because memory is cheap this day and age. We're not shooting on film. You can still shoot on film, but we're primarily, everyone's pretty much digital at this point in time. So having a couple extra memory cards is really good because, you know, what happens if you were checking photos in the hotel room and you forgot it? You know, we'll get it sent to you where your next place. We'll get the hotel to send it along, but we want to make sure you can still take photos. So having an extra memory card is very important. And yeah, having an extra battery also very important. Like I mentioned with Bryce and Grand Canyon being cold, for taking a lot of photos in the cold, you can absolutely zap a battery pretty fast. So my recommendation would be have at least 2 batteries. You don't need to bring your camera manual. I usually just try to get a digital copy and put it on my phone. But typically, I always refresh on my camera manual before I go anywhere, just to make sure I'm not going out into the field just rusty. So just have a look over it. Really important, I think, before you get out there. And then 2 optional accessories that are very important for astrophotography or early morning photography. And the first is going to be obviously that tripod. I rarely travel with a tripod, but on this departure, I think a tripod is pretty darn important. And I think a little bit more than one of those little small gorilla tripods. Having an actual tripod can be very, very handy because it's going to really limit the amount of shake and get you nice photos of the stars if that's something you want to do. Obviously, if you have no care about photographing the stars in the cold temperatures, you probably don't need a tripod then. But another thing that is also equally valuable for nighttime photography is a headlamp with the red light function. So that red light function is going to basically not change our perspective of the stars. You know, it's not going to interfere with your other travelers' photos that all of a sudden you're putting on a really bright light. No, the red lights are really nice because you can still make some changes and adjustments, and that's a lot of what nighttime photography is, just little micro adjustments. but you're doing it obviously by using that red light instead of a really bright light. So I think that's another very valuable tool to have in the toolkit. Clothing, of course, with those wide ranges in temperatures, you'll need a wide range in clothing. So you'll want a nice button-down t-shirt or just a regular, wool shirt for Zion, even the daytime temps in Bryce and the Grand Canyon. But those mornings can be pretty cold, so I recommend having some good jacket wear for sunrise at Bryce and the Grand Canyon, because those mornings can absolutely be cold. Rain jacket, good thing to have. It is a desert, very dry, but I have seen rain, especially on those springtime trips. It can rain. It's usually not an all-day thing, usually just kind of a passing storm, but I would highly encourage a rain jacket. They also work really well for wind. And then in terms of footwear, we're going to be walking around, getting photos, maybe going for some hikes. So a good sturdy pair of boots is really important. And I also recommend having at least one nice pair of warm socks, because that's going to keep you warm on those cold mornings when we're out photographing. And nobody takes really good photos when they are uncomfortable and cold. So beanie, gloves, the neck gaiter, all that stuff, really good to have. Luggage, you'll have your day pack and then your primary luggage. We ask you just to try to keep it to that. This is an 8-day trip, so I know I just told you to bring a lot of clothing, but a nice rolly suitcase, soft-sided is preferred, but we'll make a hard-sided one work as well. And then obviously your camera bag or equipment, stuff like that. We got plenty of room for you. So just please know you'll want like a day pack to do some hiking. It can be a collapsible day pack like NatHab usually sends to its travelers. So just a little bit about where we'll be going on a geologic aspect before we get into the photography. So the image on the right is a photo of the western United States and some of the desert ecosystems. You got the Chihuahua in the brown, the Sonoran in the orange, the Mojave in the green, the Great Basin up above that, and then we'll be in the yellow on that Colorado Plateau, the infamous Colorado Plateau. So roughly 80 million years ago, in what's known as the Laramide orogeny, there was a massive uplift of the western part of our country. And the Rocky Mountains were created in this time. But a big difference between the Rocky Mountains and the Colorado Plateau is when the Colorado Plateau lifted up, it essentially lifted up as one big landmass instead of the Rocky Mountains that lifted up and had all these crinkles and folds. So when the Colorado Plateau lifted up as this big landmass, over time, we have been able to get some amazing geologic oddities because of erosion via water. So the Colorado Plateau is probably the most unique geologic landscape, definitely in the United States, if not the world. And it's just so many cool, amazing things are happening within a very small area. And then focusing in a little bit more on the Colorado Plateau, our trip focuses on the Grand Staircase. So Bryce Canyon is effectively known as the top of the Grand Staircase. And you can think of this as a geologic staircase. So Bryce Canyon being at the top, those are the youngest of the rocks we'll see. And we're up high, we're photographing what's called the Pink Cliffs. Then from Bryce, we go way down into this canyon called Zion Canyon, and you're down way below photographing the White Cliffs. And then we go all the way over to the right to the Grand Canyon, that large chasm in the earth, just absolutely fantastic for photography. But a geologist by the name of Clarence Dutton, who worked very closely with John Wesley Powell, they recognized in the late 1800s that this essentially was just a geologic staircase. And it's so fascinating when you think that this was one of the last mapped places in the United States, especially the lower 48, because of how harsh the climate is, how arid the climate is, and just how remote it is. And it still to this day is harsh, arid, and remote. So it's pretty darn incredible. Just a little bit of a close-up. You can see Bryce Canyon is highlighted. Zion and Grand Canyon are all highlighted on this. So you get to photograph the pink cliffs in Bryce, and you can see the map of our route that we take starting in St. George, going to Bryce Canyon, Zion, Grand Canyon, and then back to St. George, a big loop. So I did mention, obviously, that wildlife is not the main focus of this trip, but wildlife is an important component of it. So you got great migratory birds to photograph and just enjoy. So if you're a birder, that's awesome. We got really unique reptiles. Like we got the canyon tree frog. They can be pretty darn hard to find sometimes, but they are so cool. So really enjoy those canyon tree frogs when you find them. And then a couple more of the charismatic species, the desert bighorn sheep. Love watching them roam around the canyon walls. And then, of course, the California condor, an icon of the American Southwest, and just such a great, they're still on the endangered list, but people work so hard to recover this animal. And so the story is just incredible, and it's definitely one we'll be discussing along our adventure. So our trip starts off in beautiful and sunny St. George, Utah. St. George is just an absolutely awesome spot. It's growing, and there's an amazing state park called Snow Canyon. And that's typically one of the first places we'll stop along the way up to Bryce Canyon. Snow Canyon it's a lot lower. So St. George is a little bit over 2,000 feet in elevation. So it's a lot lower than everywhere else we'll go on this trip. So you do get a different especially from the plants, you do just get a totally different tone of what's going on there. So I love to go there first. It's just about 10 minutes from our hotel. Our hotel for St. George, we're staying at the Hyatt Place. Just one night here unless you are coming in early. If you're coming in early, your expedition leader won't be there to pick you up. So just know if you're coming in the night before, the day before, Uber or Lyft are readily available. But if you are coming in the day of the trip, your EL will be there to pick you up. And we will meet at the hotel. We have an orientation there, and then we'll go out to a lovely restaurant to break bread for our first meal. And then that next day, day one of the trip, we're going to head over to that great state park, Snow Canyon State Park. One of my favorite things to do there is go to this awesome slot canyon. And slot canyons, I think, are one of the, if I'm thinking of stuff I want to photograph in the desert, I'm definitely putting a slot canyon on the list. They're carved out by water, so obviously we're not going to go in there if it's raining because that can be dangerous. So your ELs are very skilled about what to do and what to avoid. But these slot canyons are so fun to photograph, but they can have some challenges. So one thing I like to do is, I like to shoot up sometimes and play with the light, but I like to play with the dial, that exposure compensation dial on my camera. So typically on your cameras, it's going to be a dial on the top right. It could also just be a plus minus symbol. Exposure compensation can be a really useful tool for slot canyons. Another useful tool could be bracketing and taking multiple exposures. For this, you will be needing to shoot in RAW if you're trying to do this. But essentially what that will do is you can take one photo underexposed, one photo overexposed, and then merge them together. So it's a little more on the post-processing side, but if you enjoy that aspect of photography, bracketing can be a fun tip and tool to use. And we actually did just put out an article not too long ago by Mike Hillman, our photography director, on bracketing in Canyon Country on our blog, which I will plug at the end. Another thing I love to do with the slot canyons and photographing them is not just photograph the canyon walls, but also get some people in there. Take photos of people in these canyons because I think it adds a lot to that. Then we're making our way up to Bryce. On this trip, we do have some drive times that can be a little bit longer at times. So drive to Bryce is going to be about an hour and a half. Lot to see and do. But using the road here to kind of draw your eye in almost a leading line, bringing your eye in to this unique feature that's been along this road since 1925. They actually put these tunnels in. But they're incredible. I love these tunnels. I love when we first get to them and everyone sees them and just immediately wants to get out and photograph, because that's what it's all about. And then using that road to kind of draw your eye in with leading lines. So up at Bryce, 2 nights at Bryce, we'll either be staying at the Bryce Canyon Lodge or the Bryce Canyon Grand. The Bryce Canyon Lodge is in the park, a little more rustic. The Bryce Canyon Grand just right outside of the park, more modern. Pros and cons list. Bryce Canyon is all about the light. So sunrise photography at Bryce Canyon is spectacular because it's this eastward facing canyon and sunrise just lights it up. So I love kind of shooting indirectly at the hoodoos here to let the height play with it. And of course, composition is a really important aspect of landscape photography. So the rule of thirds is that bread and butter of compositional photography. You can actually set this up on your live screen on your camera. If you struggle with the rule of thirds, you can put this in to where you're seeing those grids on your camera, or in post-processing, edit it and kind of work with it. I love using the rule of thirds. A lot of the time people will do it. They'll utilize the sky as the top third and then kind of, something in the middle and then the foreground, of course. But you can zoom in and take photos, and you want to have interesting aspects at the intersecting points. So here, obviously, a nice hoodoo that's lit up right at one of those intersecting points. And then another tool that you'll want in your tool belt at Bryce Canyon is decoupling exposure and focus. So this is a tool you can use if you're in Bryce Canyon photographing the sunrise, or if you're in the Serengeti photographing Ellie's at sunrise as well. And what you're going to do is you want to expose for the beautiful clouds up above, but you want the focus to be that canyon, the canyons. So the best way to do that, on your camera, there's going to be a button, that AEL. On some cameras, it's an asterisk. And each camera operates them a little differently, so definitely try this out at home. It doesn't need to be over a dramatic scene, but press that button and then you can recompose and focus, but it's still exposed for the beautiful clouds. So that's a really important tip, I think, for this specific place and the Grand Canyon as well, because you're going to want to expose for those amazing clouds, but be focused on the canyon. So check out that AEL or that asterisk button on your camera, because I think it's an invaluable tool, especially for this trip. Then getting below Bryce Canyon is another great way to photograph this park. So it obviously, what goes down must come back up in canyon country. So if you're not an avid hiker, you don't need to do this at all. It's not required, but it can lend to some really awesome photos to be eye level with the hoodoos, photographing at them and kind of getting a little more texture and feel to these hoodoos. This is an iconic spot in Bryce, and I just love it because you're really just surrounded by these huge walls, and the evergreens just pop and give a sense of scale. So there are also people down below. I'm not sure if you can see them on your screen, but there are also people down below there as well. So I think putting a tree or a person in a photo does help give a sense of scale. Of course, astrophotography. 2 out of the 3 parks we will visit are dark sky parks. And so they have that designation of being a dark sky park. They're using the proper lighting around to not affect our eyes. So they're amazing places to photograph. And at Bryce, we'll actually go to this guy. He used to work for the Park Service, and now he's called the Dark Ranger. And we'll go there, and your ELs hit him as well. Will help you get some incredible night sky photos. And he's also got some really cool telescopes as well, just to geek out and stare at stars and talk about all this cool stuff that's up above us that we don't get to see on a daily basis. But photographing the night sky can be a challenge, of course. So you'll want to use long exposure, that tripod. Make sure you have that headlamp with the red light, because that's a really good feature. And some people say, it's a big debate amongst the photography community. How do I focus on the stars? Some people set it to infinity. Some people will actually then use manual focus, go into live view, and then pinpoint a very bright star and focus on that. I think that method is the best method personally. So kind of using manual focus and then enabling live view and then focusing on a bright star. Or in this instance, I used trees in the foreground. That's always a good bet as well, using trees, a canyon wall, stuff like that. Those are also really good bets. But it really is just going to depend on where we try to do astrophotography on this trip, because obviously you do need clear skies for that one. But it's a really fun aspect of it, and something we don't get to see on a daily basis, these amazing celestial worlds. But can't stress it enough, Bryce is all about the light. Sunrise, we're not going to miss him there. Really fun place to photograph the light at Bryce. Then we're on to Zion, a different style of photography at Zion, because as I mentioned earlier, we're going to drop about 4,000 feet. So instead of being up on the canyon rim, we're at the canyon floor shooting up. So it's a different style of photography, and it's just so amazing. I love photographing in Zion. I often find people just fall in love with Zion right away. It's an immediate, I love this place. So that's a great, it's just really great. Zion, two options on where we'll stay, either the Zion Park Lodge or just right outside of the gate, the Spring Hill Suites. Once again, pros and cons list, both are great, and both put us, all the lodges we stay at put us in great spots to go photograph, and that's the main objective. So a technique I love to do with photographing wildflowers within a landscape is the bokeh effect, and that's just kind of getting that low F number and really focusing in on the flower, and then your background's going to be slightly blurred. So here you got a nice desert paintbrush in focus, but then right behind it you have this amazing, the amazing white cliffs, the Navajo sandstone at Zion, and you can just immediately go from those flowers into the lines all the way up. So I really, really enjoy photographing. I was on my my stomach for this because these are very small flowers. So I was laying on my stomach pretty darn close to it and shooting. Another technique you can use if you didn't want to be blurred in this, my recommendation would be to go further back and use that telephoto. So you're actually kind of far away, but you're trying to achieve the same thing without a blur. My personal, I just really enjoy the blur on it. So it's kind of my artistic touch. And that's a fun part of photography, is we all kind of have our artistic touch to this. Of course, in Zion, we are going to go for a helicopter ride, and that's going to be really cool. We used to do this in Bryce Canyon, but I love the switch to Zion because at Bryce, we're already on the rim. We're already shooting down. So in Zion, since we're down shooting up, why not utilize a helicopter and shoot down at the canyon? And I was mentioning earlier, I think this is a great place for cell phone videos. So if you want to really wow some people, send out some fun text messages in the afternoon. Our afternoon helicopter ride in Zion National Park is definitely going to get a couple "what are you doing" text message responses, because it's just awesome. And it's a new addition, and I think we nailed it with this one. Really, really happy with that. If you are trying to take photos, there can sometimes be glare, of course, in helicopters when there are doors on the helicopter. So, of course, trying to angle yourself to avoid that glare. Having your lens hood cover on is another really good technique. And then, of course, some faster shutter speeds because you are moving in a helicopter, of course. So Zion's really fun. We're going to do a great hike in Zion called the Zion Narrows. It's about 1 mile each way, and you're just back in this just fantastic slot canyon. But one thing I really enjoy is actually photographing wildflowers or different plants and shooting up. So I use that same bokeh effect, really blurred behind it. I even blurred even more on this one. But the flower is nice and crisp. But up above it, you have the colorful canyon walls. So it's a fun effect, and it's kind of different, right? That's sometimes a good thing to do, is to just have a little bit of a different photo. Zion and all of these parks can actually also be great for fall colors. So if you're doing our fall trip, these parks all shockingly have amazing fall colors too, whether it's the aspens up at Bryce or the Grand Canyon, or just the big mixture of cottonwoods. down in Zion. So yeah, if you're into the fall foliage, Canyon Country is a cool place to go photograph. I couldn't believe it when I first saw fall colors there. Another fun technique is since you're down in the canyon, sometimes sunset and sunrise in Zion can actually be quite a challenge because you're just really deep in the earth. You need, in my opinion, you need a lot of clouds to get a really good sunset at this park. But one thing I enjoy doing is doing the sunbursts. As the sun is clearing the canyon walls and it's partially blocked with a really high F number, obviously please don't stare at the sun, but you through your viewfinder, it gives you some protection. Utilizing that partially blocked sun with a really high F number, I think can create some pretty dramatic photos. But a lot of the photography we do in Zion is in the daytime. We can go for astro as well there. It really just depends on people's desires and also, what we've been doing in Bryce as well. Zion is not defined as a dark sky park yet. They are in the process of getting that designation by changing a lot of the lights in the town of Springdale. So they'll be changing them to more dark friendly lights. But of course, Zion is just a magical place to photograph, and there are just photographic opportunities galore. East Canyon is a lot different than the Zion Canyon proper, so definitely an amazing stop along our adventure. Then, of course, we are on to the grand finale, the Grand Canyon. So doesn't need much of an introduction, but we go to the North Rim for the Grand Canyon on our canyons trip, and that's to avoid the crowds at the South Rim. I absolutely love the South Rim. There are so many amazing viewpoints at the South Rim, but the North Rim sees about 10% of the visitation that the South Rim does. So the North Rim, in my opinion, is where to go. We'll stay at the only game in town, the Grand Canyon North Rim Lodge. It's awesome. I really love the North Rim Lodge. It's 100% rustic. Definitely, it's not a luxury lodge by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also really, really cool. Great history to it. And it's just an amazing place to be based, to go photograph. I love this. You can see the building with those big windows. It's just this awesome room you walk into when you first get to the lodge. It's a great place. So we're there for 2 nights. It's the only game in town. And we're back with the Grand Canyon, you are back to sunrise and sunset photography, in my opinion, as being the absolute best time of the day to photograph at the Grand Canyon. So here you have one of my favorite viewpoints looking out to the east. You got Mount Hayden as the sun is rising, lighting up Mount Hayden. And people often ask me in these big landscape photos, where do I focus? Keep it simple. I think about 1/3 of the way into the photo is going to be the best place to find that focal point and then go from there. Obviously, if you're trying to get something in the foreground in focus and have the blurred back effect, that's just a different style. But overall, if you're looking for big landscapes, I think about 1/3 of the way into the photo is going to be your best bet here. Another thing at the Grand Canyon that I think is really important to try to utilize is indirect lighting. So this is going on about, I'd say 45 minutes before the sun is setting. It's still pretty high in the sky, just about to break through the clouds, and the sun's coming through, and you can start to get some sun rays. But instead of shooting at the sun or behind me, I'm shooting to the right and kind of angling up canyon to take advantage of the light rays and all the dust that's starting to be visible. So you're kind of indirectly utilizing the sun, and just indirect light, I think, is a very valuable tool in canyon country. And then, like I mentioned, that telephoto, bringing the telephoto. I don't know if there's a better place for a telephoto amongst landscapes as the Grand Canyon, because sometimes it's almost too big. It's sometimes, but it isn't. It's perfect. And so that's why the telephoto, I think, is a very valuable tool at the Grand Canyon, because sometimes you can get a lot of contrast close to you. But let's just say you want to get right through that contrast and shoot out because there's great light in the distance. That telephoto is going to be a really good tool to have here. And you can get condors and golden eagles soaring around the canyon. So that can be kind of fun to try to pick up those big birds in flight. Using the canyon as framing, on the north rim of the Grand, you have amazing forests, these huge forests that are right up there. So utilizing those natural features, whether they're rocks or trees, utilizing those natural features, I think is really, really important to try to do here, because it just draws your eyes into the photo, right? You got these blurred trees, but you're going right through that to the Grand. And on all of our trip, I know I mentioned bringing a rain jacket, important. I love when we get some weather at either Bryce or the Grand Canyon, and you're up on these rims and you have huge sight lines, rain that's maybe going off 20 miles in the distance, and you're saying, okay, let's photograph that. And so in this instance, I'm actually utilizing a person taking a photo, and they are, they're kind of like, oh, what's that person? Wow, really cool. So we had a great rainstorm. We never got rained on this whole time. But we were photographing a rainstorm on the other side of the canyon. Of course, stuff like lightning, we're not going to mess with that because you are high up on a canyon wall, but sometimes you get lightning off in the distance, and that's really special. I consider it lucky to get a passing storm at the Grand Canyon. And so, we're always, I think one of the things, if you're Googling, photographing in canyon country, contrast is always going to be a big thing. So you have big shadows, especially as the sun's starting to set. It's about an hour or so before sunset, and you have these huge shadows going on. I think it's kind of cool to showcase the shadows, but another technique, you can lean into the shadows and go black and white. And I didn't do this in camera. I did this post-processing, but I think it exemplifies the canyon and the dramatic aspect to that. So, I don't often switch photos to black and white. It's not a personal thing I often do, but I think at places like the Grand Canyon, it's a great tool to have. It's something you don't need to do in camera. You can do it post-processing. And if you don't know how to do that on the trip, your EL can help you learn how to do that. But of course, it's an amazing place. This is utilizing that AEL button, that decoupling focus and exposure. I'm focused on the tree, but I wanted to get that cool purple light while the sun was kind of high. It was kind of like a middle time. So we had really good colors, but it was weird. So I thought, okay, let's get creative with it, bring out the artist in you. And so I got the light behind, so I exposed for that using that AEL button, and then I focused back in on the tree, high f-stop, got the sunburst. And I don't think I'm not gonna print this one, but I do think it's a fun photo. So from the Grand Canyon, we're then gonna make our way back to St. George. We do ask, when we're going back to St. George, no earlier flight than 12:30. That's because we do have a little bit of a drive, about 3.5 hours from the North Rim to St. George. So please don't book that flight any earlier, because it can just complicate the rest of the day. And so your EL will have all that info. And then a couple great resources that I like to plug. The Natural Photographer blog. I did mention that about bracketing earlier and utilizing that technique. There was a great blog post by Mike on that. An excellent expedition leader and our sustainability director, Court Whelan, has a great podcast called The Wild Photographer. He's got just episodes on just about everything you can think about photography-wise. So if you like podcasts, that's a great resource, and I would listen to a couple of those episodes. Lensrental.com, NatHab15. That's going to help you if you wanted to try, to rent a lens that's a really low F number to see if you are into astrophotography. That lensrental.com is a really good tool, because sometimes, buying a lens for one trip might not make sense, but renting the lens could totally make sense. And then if you love it, obviously, then you can buy it. Our PDBs are great. Our pre-departure briefings, those are awesome. Great information about it, photography, history, all the animals. So definitely, if you're on the trip, you'll have been sent one of those. And then a couple books I want to plug, because I think they help get people into this part of the world, is the Down the Great Unknown. It's the story of John Wesley Powell going down the Colorado River, the first person to ever do it. It's just totally insane and it's awesome. And it's just like a page turner. And so if if you're going on this trip and you're like, I'm here in Florida and how can I get into canyon country? I would pick up Down the Great Unknown and give it a read because you're going to immediately be like, wow, one, John Wesley Powell's crazy, and two, I want to get out there. And then Beyond the 100th Meridian, once again, kind of about that John Wesley Powell story and the settling of the West in that arid country and how hard it was. Just fascinating, amazing books. Plug them. And then, of course, we've got great daily dose of nature webinars. And then if you have any further questions, our adventure concierge is going to be happy to help you out. And then thank you all so much for tuning in and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Arthur. Now, before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right corner and click on those three lines. You open that up, you'll see questions. Click on that. Feel free to send them on over. All right. So, would you say it would be worth bringing star trackers for the Astro sessions? Are there some sort of online or apps that we could use? Anything like that?
Yeah, there are a lot of great applications for stars, and I think it's a really nice thing to have. And they're cheap. There's some that are free this day and age, but I highly encourage you to get a star app because of just how special this part of our country is to be able to see the amount of stars we can see. It really is a great thing. And so in the App Store, whether you're Android or iPhone, there are a number of different star apps. And so that's something I highly encourage you to do. Like Skyview Elite is one. Night Sky is also one that I've used. I think Night Sky has kind of like a purple icon. Some of them are free, and the free ones are also fine too.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So, so if we drive to St. George, is it going to be possible to leave our car at the hotel, or is there someplace safe for it?
Absolutely. So if you're driving to St. George, great question. We will, you can either ask the front desk yourself or your expedition leader will talk to you and talk to the front desk, and they'll just give you a pass that you can put on your car, and it's a safe place to park, just right in front of the hotel, and they'll just give you a pass for the amount of time that we're gone. So great question, but yes, you can drive, totally fine. And then I will also just say, if you're coming in early to St. George, you might want to consider renting a car because it is a little spread out. So if you were to try to go do something, you might want to rent a car if you were coming in early to St. George.
And is it possible to fly to St. George, or do
Yeah,
we?
yeah, great question. So St. George has a very small and convenient airport, really nice. So it is possible to fly into St. George. Some people choose to fly into Las Vegas and take the St. George shuttle just based off of where they're coming from. And the St. George shuttle is also very convenient. And your EL, if you're coming in the day of the trip, will pick you up at either location. So it just kind of depends on just how your flight routes are looking. But my recommendation, I think it's kind of what works best for you. And it's because sometimes when people say, oh, I flew into Vegas, I didn't want to do 3 connections, is typically what I've heard when people fly into Vegas.
Great. Thank you for the advice. So do we go into the western section of Zion near St. George?
Oh, over on Kolob Canyon? Yeah, I think that's the plan. That's typically the plan, is to go over to the Kolob Canyon, the least visited part of Zion. I absolutely love Kolob Canyon. It's amazing. You're higher up. You're kind of getting a little bit of maybe a teaser of what the helicopter flight can look like. I typically try to go to Kolob. 2 years ago, they had a big rock slide and the road was all messed up, but they got that fixed last year and we were right back at it because it is a great place to photograph and go for a hike if you enjoy that.
Great, thank you. So, can we talk about timing? Is it spring, summer, fall? That's the best time to come out there. Can you give us some hints or
Yeah.
clues?
Um, Personal recommendation would be to avoid summer. We avoid summer as a company. Our photo trips are going at the peak times of spring and fall. That's because one, the temperatures are a lot more manageable, and then two, the crowds are a lot more reasonable. Zion is an absolutely amazing park, but it's popular, and so to be there at peak season in the middle of the summer, you will definitely notice you're around a lot of people. I think we'll notice that any time of the year at this point in Zion, anyways. But my recommendation is to go either on the fall or the spring to avoid the big crowds and the extreme heat. Because, the cold, it only lasts for a little bit. The days warm up beautifully, but the heat, it can be there all day, and you're in this warm canyon. It's 110 degrees. It can be pretty intense. So we try to avoid that when we can. So spring and fall are my recommendations for that.
Perfect, thank you. So, can you shoot Bryce looking up?
Yes, and that's something where if you're a hiker and you want to do some hiking, that's a great aspect is hiking down into the canyon. You'll lose about 600 feet of elevation, but then you're below the hoodoos shooting up at them. And that's an awesome vantage point, in my opinion. And so I love it. And we actually will also do a trail where you don't necessarily need to lose all the elevation to get that same effect of being below the hoodoos. There's another great trail that I love to do. So I enjoy shooting up at Bryce to try to capture the hoodoos, not just from above on the canyon wall, but also below them.
Great, thank you. So will a 24 120 millimeter be wide enough for landscapes?
I think so. Yeah, I think a 24 to 120. I think that's a pretty good focal point. You might miss a little bit, but honestly, I think that's a pretty good lens for this trip, in my opinion.
Great, thank you, thank you. So here's a technical question. How do you do the decouple aspect if you've designated the AEL button as your focus button?
So if the AEL is also your focus button, you're going to want to go into your settings, and you can maybe use Google to help you do this. Or if you bring your camera with you on your trip, bring it to dinner, and your EL will switch this for you. But in your settings, your AEL button can be programmed for other things. And so if you want, you can go into your settings and switch that to where your AEL button is your exposure button. And then that's the best way to decouple it. It's most likely something that's in your settings. And then while we're on that topic, the AEL button can work in many different ways. Sometimes you have to hold it down and sometimes it's like an on off switch. You press it once and then it will release either after 15 seconds or after you take a photo. So a couple different methods, but my guess is if your AEL button's set on focus, it's something that's in your settings. And Google or bring it to dinner on the trip and we'll switch it for you.
Gotcha, gotcha. Thank you for that advice.
Absolutely.
Um, well, so can I use a 50 millimeter f 1.2 for astro
Oh,
photography?
yeah, a nifty 50. Those are great lenses. That's a great lens to bring. You'll be obviously a little more zoomed in, but really that low f number is what you want. So nifty 50 is a great lens to have, really low f number. That's the goal. You'll be slightly more zoomed in, but I think that's a great lens to bring.
Cool, excellent, thank you. So, can you explain a little bit about what the advantages of going on the photo expedition is to the regular expedition is?
Yeah, having the smaller group size, and the smaller group size can help, especially when it comes to photo instruction, because your EL has a little more time to work with you specifically on photography. So I would say if you're not a photographer, our classic nature departures are amazing. But if you're someone that's potentially a photographer or you're curious about photography, that's a great place to go. But if you're a skilled photographer, the dates work well with you on our classic nature departure, they're going to be fine. It's just your EL is potentially not going to be a photographer themselves. You're still going to go for some sunrises and sunsets, of course, because it's one of the highlights of the trip. But you might, instead of doing 2 sunrises at Bryce, you might just do one. You might do 1 sunrise at the Grand Canyon. Whereas the photo trips, that's going to be a big priority, is to go for those just magical times of the day.
Great. Thanks for clarifying the difference. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you have.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. Obviously, I'm super excited to get out to Canyon Country in just about a month to photograph these incredible scenes. And thank you all so much for taking the time this afternoon.
And Arthur, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can take a photo trip with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.